The school hallways were nearly silent by 6:45 p.m. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional squeak of a mop against the linoleum. Most of the staff had gone home, their goodbyes echoing off walls he would later scrub, but William stayed behind, always the last to leave. That's how it had been for the last 18 years. He moved slowly, but with quiet pride. His hands, once calloused from construction work, now smelled faintly of lemon, disinfectant, and bleach. His back ached in that familiar way it always did when the weather shifted, and his knees creaked when he bent to pick up a crumpled juice box left behind by some fourth grader, who'd probably forget it even existed tomorrow. While William wasn't bitter. He never had been, even when the kids rushed past him without a second glance, even when some teachers called him sir, just so they wouldn't have to remember his name, even when he cleaned up after a parent-teacher night, unnoticed, while others toasted wine in the lounge. He simply worked, not because he had to, anymore his daughter had begged him to retire last year, but because he needed to. There was something sacred, almost redemptive, about the quietness of service. He wasn't the man he used to be. Not since his wife passed. Not since he broke his own heart trying to pretend he could heal. That day, nothing seemed out of place. The trash bins in the cafeteria were overflowing, like always. Someone had spilled orange soda near the lockers again, and a trail of muddy footprints stretched from the back door to the auditorium. He cleaned it all without complaint, humming something low and familiar under his breath. Maybe it was an old Ray Charles tune. Maybe it was just the silence. It was near 8 o'clock when he wheeled his cleaning cart toward the old supply closet tucked behind the gymnasium, the one hardly anyone used anymore. The door creaked, like it always did, and the light above it flickered, like it was debating whether to die tonight or hang on one more shift. He jiggled the key in the lock. Something didn't feel right. The air smelled different. Almost, sweet. Not like disinfectant. Not like chemical floor wax, like cinnamon. He opened the door, and stopped. There, sitting right in the center of the shelf where the extra mop heads were kept, was a gift bag. Neatly folded tissue paper poked out the top, and a golden ribbon dangled like it had been tied by someone who actually took their time. For a second, William just stared, as if by blinking, the bag might disappear. He hadn't received a gift in years. Not since his retirement party from his first job before the cancer took Lisa. Before he had to start over as a janitor at 62, because Social Security didn't stretch as far as they said it would. He stepped inside. It wasn't his birthday. It wasn't Christmas. It wasn't, single quotes, T. anything. His first thought was that it must have been left for someone else. But his name was on the tag, handwritten, in blue ink. Just William. He reached for it with shaking hands. The bag was heavier than it looked. Not heavy like bricks, but heavy, like meaning, like care, like someone had thought it through. Inside was a thermos. A sturdy, steel one, the kind you don't buy cheap. It had a small sticker on the bottom that read "Keeps warm for 12 hours. Then came the second item, a new pair of leather gloves. Not the kind you use for cleaning. The kind people wear when walking through snow in coats that cost more than his car. They were warm to the touch, like someone had just held them. And then came the envelope, cream-colored, unsealed. He almost didn't open it because something in his chest, something old and cautious, told him this wasn't just a thank you card. This wasn't a "we appreciate you" moment from the staff. This wasn't a holiday gesture. This was personal. He slipped the note from the envelope. 4 words stared up at him, written in the same blue ink. "You saved my life." That's all. He read it once, twice, a third time, and still he didn't move. Not. For nearly a full minute, his hand gripped the paper like it might dissolve if he let go. His mind raced. He hadn't done anything heroic. He wasn't the kind of man who got medals. He didn't remember pulling anyone from a fire or talking someone off a ledge. He just cleaned floors, emptied trash cans, pushed a cart, listened to the world happen around him, but the words didn't lie. "You saved my life." He sank to the edge of the mop bucket and sat, and suddenly, a face came back to him. 2 months ago, the girl outside the gym, 9th grade, maybe 10th, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, hoodie up, backpack at her feet, crying, quietly, like someone who'd already convinced herself no one would ask why. He hadn't said much, just offered her his sandwich, ham and cheese, still a little cold from the staff fridge. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to fix her, just sat beside her for a while, handing her half of his lunch like it was no big deal, like it wasn't the only thing he had left to eat. Until he got home, she didn't say a word that day, just nodded and took the sandwich. He hadn't seen her again after that. He figured she'd transferred, or maybe she just started using another door. But now. Now. He wasn't so sure. He turned the card over. Nothing on the back. No name, no date, just those 4 words. It was like someone had carved them straight into his chest. William leaned back against a closet wall. For the first time in months, maybe years, He let his eyes close and breathed in the silence like it was something holy. He didn't cry, not yet, but something inside him shifted, something that had been stiff and sore, and locked up for too long finally stretched its limbs, and dared to feel again. William didn't tell anyone about the gift that night. He folded the note and placed it gently back inside the envelope, then tucked it into his shirt pocket like it was something alive, something fragile. He hung the gloves carefully on the side of his cart. The thermos he held in his hands as he walked out of the building's low, measured steps, like the floor beneath him had changed and he didn't want to break it. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty, just his old blue sedan sitting under a flickering lamp. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time before turning the key. He didn't play the radio. He didn't call his daughter like he usually did after late shifts. That night, silence felt like the only thing sacred enough to hold what he was feeling. The next morning, something had changed. Not in the school, the kids were still loud. The teachers still rushed past him without looking. The intercom still screeched announcements with the urgency of war, even when it was just about lost lunchboxes. But William moved differently. He swept slower. Not because he was tired, but because he was paying attention to everything, to everyone. He watched the way the girl in the front row fiddled with the cuff of her sleeve like she was hiding something. He noticed how one of the boys laughed a little too loudly every time someone walked away like he was trying to prove he didn't care. And more than once, he stopped just long enough to say something small, something easy. Hey, that's a cool patch on your backpack. You're drawing. That's really good. Want me to grab you another milk from the back fridge? He didn't think of it as saving lives, but he'd learned now that sometimes you don't have to know you're saving someone to do it. Still, the question haunted him. Who left the note? He didn't want to ask around. Didn't want to risk making it about him. Some things lose their magic when you try to explain them. So he waited, observed, wondered. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, on a Friday afternoon, that something shifted again. He was cleaning the teacher's lounge, wiping crumbs from the counter, replacing the burnt coffee filter when he noticed a piece of paper tucked beneath the sugar jar. He almost ignored it, but it was the same. Handwriting. Blue ink. Same quiet elegance. He unfolded the note. It said, "Sometimes people forget how much light they bring." You didn't. No signature. Just the words. And suddenly, William felt it again, that sensation that he was walking inside a story he didn't fully understand, but that was still being written with his name between the lines. Over the next few days, more notes appeared. Taped to his cart handle, slipped into the broom closet. Once even folded inside a clean mop head. Each one simple. Each one handwritten. Each one anonymous. You saw me when I felt invisible. Your kindness was the only reason I came back. The next day, people forget janitors see everything. I hope you know how much that meant. The last one just said, "You reminded me I still mattered." It was never signed. But by then, it didn't need to be. He started keeping them in a small box inside his locker, tucked behind an old lunch bag and a photo of his late wife. Some nights, when the world felt particularly heavy and his bones ached in places even rest couldn't reach, he'd open the box and read them again. They didn't fix everything, but they filled the spaces where bitterness could have grown, and in their place, something gentler bloomed. The staff began to notice too. Maybe it was the way the kids lingered around William's cart, asking if he had any more of those lemon drops he kept hidden in his side pocket. Maybe it was the laughter that echoed from hallways he used to mop in silence. One afternoon, the principal stopped him in the stairwell. "William, do you have a moment?" "Of course, I've been hearing things. Good things. Kids mentioning you by name, saying you helped them." William shrugged, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Just doing my job." The principal looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think you know the kind of job you're doing." That week, the school announced a new initiative. They called it the Quiet Hero Program, a way to recognize acts of kindness that often went unseen. The first person honored William. He tried to decline, of course, didn't want the attention, didn't want to stand on a stage or accept a plaque. But when he walked into the auditorium that morning, the entire school was there, students, staff, even parents. The applause was loud, but what stopped him cold wasn't the volume. It was the faces, smiling, tearful, thankful. One by one, kids began to stand up. First a girl in a yellow sweater, then a boy with a speech impediment, then 3 more, then 10. Each one holding a note card. Each one reading out loud. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for feeding me. Thank you for walking me to my mom's car when I was too scared. Thank you for telling me I didn't have to smile just to be liked." The final voice came from the back. Small, wavering, familiar. It was the girl from the gym. She stepped forward, no longer hiding beneath a hoodie. She held nothing in her hands, just the memory of that cold sandwich and the man who sat beside her without judgment. "I was going to end my life that day," she said softly. "No one moved, no one saw me. Not really, not my teachers, not my friends, not even my parents." She looked at William. "But you did." And that was when he cried. Not quietly, not with shame, but openly. Because grief sometimes masquerades as silence, and healing often arrives In whispers, that night, he opened the supply closet again, just to look. The gift bag was still there, now empty. The thermos still kept his coffee warm. The glove sat folded neatly in the side pocket of his coat, but what mattered most wasn't what was in the bag, it was what had been poured into him, grace, recognition, and a love that didn't ask for anything in return. As he closed the door, he noticed something tucked behind the mop bucket. A final envelope. This time sealed with a small gold sticker. Inside, one sentence, a different handwriting now. Scripted. Sharp, from the principal. It read, "Your shift ends at 4 p.m. now. Mr. William, starting Monday, you'll be mentoring students in the counseling room." Below it, "We pay our heroes too." The following Monday, William showed up early. Not just because he was nervous, not even because he wasn't used to being called anything other than janitor or sir. He came early because he didn't know how to walk into a room and be seen. He'd spent decades in the background. He was the kind of man who cleaned the footprints but never left his own. Now they wanted him to lead something. He stood outside the door, labeled Student Resource Center, his reflection caught in the glass. He still wore his janitor's uniform, creased neatly, buttoned up to the collar, but this time, the name tag had been replaced. Same stitching, same color, but one word had changed. Mentor. He traced the letters with his thumb, like they might come undone if he breathed too hard. Inside the room, the walls were lined with mismatched chairs and shelves full of forgotten board games and partially used notebooks. It smelled like old crayons and dried-up markers. But it was quiet, gentle. One by one, the students began to arrive. No announcements, no roll call. Just quiet footsteps and hesitant glances. Some of them carried books. Others carried nothing but silence. William greeted each one with a nod. No speeches, no rules, just presence. At first, they didn't talk. He didn't ask them to. Instead, he poured hot cocoa into chipped mugs he brought from home and handed them out like invitations. Eventually, they started opening up. Not all at once, but slowly, like a frozen lake cracking under sunlight. A boy named Mateo confessed that he hated coming home because his dad didn't remember his birthday again. A girl named Ellie shared that her mother had been sick for months and she didn't know how to tell her friends. One student showed him poems they had written folded tight, ink smudged from erasing every second line. William never offered solutions. He just listened, and then told them something they hadn't heard in a long time, maybe ever. That makes sense. I would have felt the same way. You're not broken. One afternoon, a boy named Caleb refused to come in, stood outside the door with clenched fists and a trembling jaw. William stepped out and sat on the hallway floor beside him. Didn't say a word. Caleb stayed frozen for 10 minutes, then blurted out, "I thought about running into traffic yesterday." William didn't flinch, just nodded. "You didn't?" Caleb's lip trembled. "I don't know why." William looked at him. "I do." Caleb broke, collapsed into him like a dam giving way to its own weight. That was the moment the school changed. Not the building, not the rules, but the heartbeat of it. Teachers began referring students to William's room, not because they had problems to fix, but because they needed someone who'd understand without fixing them. Other janitors noticed, too. Started walking a little taller. One of them even said, "Feels like the uniform means something again." By the end of the semester, William's room had been repainted by the art class. Murals of trees and bridges and quiet lakes covered the walls. Each brushstroke a thank you he never asked for. On the last day before winter break, he found a box on his chair. No label, no handwriting. Inside a photograph of him, sitting on the hallway floor. Caleb curled into his side. The photo had been taken without him knowing. On the back, someone had written, "Heroes don't wear capes. They carry mops." He didn't cry that time, he laughed. A deep, soft laugh that felt like his ribs had needed it for years. But that night, as he locked up the supply closet, something strange happened. The gift bag was there again. Same golden ribbon. Same folded tissue paper. He hadn't seen it in months. Inside, this time, just a single object, a book. The cover was plain, no title, but when he opened it, every page was filled with letters. From students, staff, parents, each one handwritten. One said, "I stopped cutting because of something you said. You probably don't remember, but I do." Another read, "My son never smiled at school until he started sitting in your room." And then there was one more. From a woman, a mother. "I don't know who you are, but my daughter said she would have died if it weren't for you. She won't say your name, but she wrote, 'He cleaned the floors and gave me half a sandwich and didn't need to know why I cried.'" The final line, "You're the reason I still have a daughter. Thank you." William closed the book gently. His hands trembled, but not from age, from the weight of being seen, from the warmth of being named in someone's story when for so long, he thought he was just a footnote. That night, when he got home, he didn't turn on the TV. He didn't sit in his usual chair. He placed the book beside the framed photo of his wife. Then whispered, "Looks like I finally became the man you believed I could be." He smiled, and this time, he didn't feel alone. Years passed, and the school changed in ways only time can explain. Buildings were renovated, teachers came and went, new programs replaced old ones. Faces grew older, and lockers were repainted with brighter colors, but one thing stayed the same. The chair in the counseling room by the window. It was William's chair. He'd never claimed it as his own, but every student, every staff member, every soul who had sat in that room understood it belonged to the man who'd turned silence into shelter. He retired on a Thursday, no announcement over the PA system, no cake in the teacher's lounge. That's how he wanted it. Quiet, simple, just another shift finished. He walked the halls one last time with his mop bucket, even though they had already hired a replacement. He needed to do it, needed to feel the floors beneath him, to run his hand along the wall where he'd once leaned while waiting for that girl to speak, to nod at the trophy cabinet, the old vending machine, the janitor closet that started everything. He opened the door to that closet, just once more. Still smelled of cinnamon. Empty shelves now. Dust settled in corners. The light overhead had finally stopped flickering. On the hook, where his old gloves used to hang, there was an envelope, just like the first one, cream-colored, unsealed. But this time, the handwriting was his own. Forgotten he wrote it. Years ago, a note to himself. He opened it slowly. Inside, just 2 sentences. One day, you'll save someone without realizing it, and one day they'll save you back. He smiled, not because it was profound, but because it was true. He locked the door behind him gently and slid the key into the front office drop box with a soft clink. No one saw him leave. No one, except one boy standing near the flagpole. Mr. William, he turned. The boy held a brown paper bag. Inside, 2 sandwiches. I saved you one, the boy said. William took it with a quiet nod. Ham and cheese. Yeah, it's not much, but I just wanted you to know. I listen, I see things now. William put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then you'll do just fine. And he walked away, not quickly, not dramatically, just the way he always had, slow, with care, like each step mattered. But something had changed in that school after he left. Years later, when new students asked about the chair in the counseling room, someone always told them the same story. Not about a janitor, about a man who taught people how to speak by listening. About a man who cleaned floors by day and restored hearts by night. They called it the closet miracle. A tradition began. Every graduation, students left gift bags inside the old supply closet. Some with sandwiches, some with gloves, some with handwritten notes that just said, I saw you. I'm still here because of you. And every year, they would sit in that room by the window and tell stories about grief, about healing, about how one man's silence had made more noise than 1,000 speeches. But most of all, they told the story of the first gift bag and the janitor who opened it only to discover that sometimes the most powerful note isn't one that praises you, but one that reminds you you were never invisible. And somewhere, maybe far away, maybe close by, William sits on a porch, thermos in hand, listening to the wind carry echoes from a school he once called home. The sandwich still tastes like memory. The note still lives in his wallet, and every time he walks by a child sitting alone, he remembers. He was never just cleaning floors, he was clearing a path. The end.